So I feel drawn to doing a few videos to start here, maybe two or three, just off the cuff. I don't really know what I'm going to talk about. In fact, one of my ideas right now is just to pull a tarot card, see what it is, and just see what associations that brings. So um, you just you can't make this up. I pulled the death card. Okay, we're gonna start big. We're gonna start off big. The tarot is recommending that I pull the death that I talk about death. Okay, death. The death card is the card of transformation. Let's see. It's the card of transformation that can be quite painful. Not necessarily because you're literally physically dying, although that's a possibility, but more likely because an old identity is dying, right? An old way of doing things is dying. And I feel like I've been going through many, many death processes over the last, 2018. What is that? No, it's 6 years ago. 6 years ago. As of the recording of this video, many death processes, and in fact, it all started with a death. It started with my mom passing away in 2013, and me just kind of it just affected me very strongly. There was a lot of deep self-reflection of how I wasn't in touch as much as I wanted to be. It was cancer, and I think in a way of avoidance, I sort of just fully trusted that, or I told myself that I fully trusted that she would recover, that it was no big deal and she would recover. And actually, there was no reason for me to think that. The cancer was already highly progressed when they found it. But I had never been through someone having cancer before in that way, and it was easy to fool myself. And so I didn't come home. I did come home. I did come home and visit, but I didn't do it as often as maybe I could have, right? And anyway, there was a lot of regret. And so I didn't think so at the time, but when I reflect back, I was super depressed. I was like functionally depressed. The only thing that kept me going was going to work. I was a front-end developer, user experience designer at the time. I can still do those things, but at the moment, that's not what I'm doing. And so, yeah, it kind of was a catalyst for a multi-year process, starting in 2014. I don't know if I'll go through the whole story right now. But, the death card, transitions. So transformations, they can really, this whole period of spiritual transitions and transformations started with that, a real death. And I think in a way, I wanted to die. I wouldn't have been able to do it, but I wanted to die after that. There was a point where I kind of gave God an ultimatum, so to speak, what I called God at that time. There was no definition for, I saw God as like spirit, great spirit, something like that. I did have a Christian upbringing. I had departed from that, and I was more into the occult. But actually, I was actually kind of atheist at this point, or agnostic. I was in that area because I just felt like there wasn't enough evidence, right? And then and so this ultimatum came because I was just like, oh my gosh, there's no meaning. You just live and you die, and everybody suffers. And I was like, God, if you're real, if there's more to life than just this meat suit that decays and dies, if there's more purpose, if there's more meaning, I need to know. If you're like, if you, it was basically if you're real, and by if you're real, I meant, all those things I just said. Is there a deeper meaning to this life, a magic to it, a greaterness to it? Um, I need to know. I need to know. And my ultimatum was like, I need to know, or else I'm just going to go full atheist. I'm just going to go full materialism. Just never look back, because I done a lot of spiritual stuff. I had done ceremonial magic. I'd done all kinds of spiritual things because I always had this like flame of like feeling that there was something to spirituality, and that flame was going out, and I was like, I'm just never going to look back at spirituality if I don't have any evidence. And that very weekend, I think maybe even like 2 days later, maybe one day later, maybe a day and a half, it was a very short period of time. I I was just drawn to watch these videos by Alan Watts. And it was this series that he had done, I think, maybe for PBS, the public broadcasting service of the United States, where he was explaining Eastern wisdom and the ideas of Zen and things like that. Maybe it was something that he had done for maybe Berkeley, UC Berkeley. Don't quote me on that. And he was explaining things, explaining the Eastern view, as he put it. I think he might have even said like Oriental or something like that. But I think heavily influenced by Zen, but he was also talking about Taoism as well, of spirituality and reality and what it is. And he was explaining it in very practical terms, very experiential terms, very simple terms that you could see. And I remember he was explaining this one thing about how, when you look at whenever you draw something on a piece of paper, whenever you draw a figure on a piece of paper, I'm just going to do like a little dot here, a circle. When you draw a dot on a piece of paper, how do you know the dot? Right? How do you know the dot on a piece of paper? How do you know it? Well, you know the dot because you've got the dot there, you've got the form of the dot, but you've also got all this space around the dot. And both of those work together to show you the dot, right? And so you take that into three-dimensional space, how do you know the form of a person, right? Or any object, pencil. How do you know their form? Well, it's their form, and it's also the space around them. The space around them that defines the form, right? And I was following along with this, and I was like looking in my own experience of like, whoa. And then he's like, we have this assumption that space is nothing. But it's like the shadow to the light. It's not nothing. It's part of the same wave. he explained it so much better than I think I am right now, but it's like it's part of the same wave. It's, you can't see the trough of the wave unless you see the you can't see the peak of the wave unless you see the trough of the wave, right? And then he was like, and then in the same way, you could see life and death. The death is the trough of the peak, which is life. It's all the same wave. And it's like reincarnation. Is every peak is a reincarnation, every trough is a death. Every peak is a reincarnation, every trough is a death. And you know life because there's death. Life has meaning, it has realness because there is death. Otherwise, it would be undifferentiated. And it's like those two dimensions, suddenly I could see, like very directly, the one fabric of reality. Like, how else to explain it? That everything is just one something. It's all one something waving, you know? And maybe we can go into that another time. But for me, it was a direct answer. It was a direct answer to my question. I needed to know there was something more, that we weren't just meat suits, that we weren't just accidents in space. And this gave me the experience of recognizing that we, not only are we not accidents, but we're not even separate. Death is not separate from life. And I just remember feeling so mind blown. Just my mind was just like, could not grasp like what I was like the recognition was so clear, and my mind was just like, what do I do with this? This is amazing. And it set off a whole process, and I won't go into all the details, but I for years I had tried to meditate, and then all of a sudden I couldn't stop meditating, and I was meditating every day. I was meditating more than the instructions of this particular meditation technique said I should, and which was fine, I think, at that point. I was just running on pure intuition. What do I do next? What do I do next? And I found this thing called self-inquiry, and we can get into all that stuff later if anyone wants to, but and then and it led me to going to India, and then I was following a teacher for a while, and and I was consuming so many YouTube videos, all these YouTube videos of people like Rupert Spira and Osho, and now I'm not saying, when I say these names, I'm not necessarily recommending anybody, but it was just this kind of I never understood or was into this kind of Eastern-based spirituality, Vedic spirituality and Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, and all of a sudden these teachings were speaking to me. Like, I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm seeing, and I couldn't get enough of it. Muji. And for years, I was like, this is it. This is the end game. And in a way, it is. And in a way, it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. I feel like I'm putting a lot into this video. There's so much to unpack. There's so much to unpack. But I'm at a place where I realize it's like that kind of realization is just the beginning. Because then you get to live your life. Then you get to live your life knowing your true nature. Even though It's not your life. Okay, I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm not going to get into that right now because it complicates it. What this video, well, I don't know what this video is, but I can just feel that this isn't the time to get into that. But wow, 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 wow. Transformation. That's where we started. And, there's a book by, oh man, he goes by the pen name A.H. Almas. And I'm drawing a blank at what his true name is. But he wrote a book called Runaway Realization. And you could also call it runaway transformation in some ways. It's like once you take off the brakes, it's just like transformation. You're just guided. You're just flow. And this death card, this transformation, the spirals. I love this death card because it's got these like 5 spirals, if you can see them in there, and it's just like this evolution. There's actually, I think, evolution is kind of described in this card a little bit. I mean, maybe not. Anyway, it just keeps going. It just keeps going and going and going. And I'm so here for it. I wasn't always here for it. Oh my. There's so much more. But that feels good for this video. Thank you for tuning in.